Pat, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the State Ethics Commission. Today is November the 20th, and the time is now 9 o'clock. We'll have a roll call, and if you are alone, please indicate you are alone.
Starting with Vice Chair Tobias.
Present and alone.
Commissioner Hong.
Present and alone.
Commissioner Thielen.
Here and alone.
And recognizing Commissioner Becker and Chair Fong are in the conference room with myself and Miles in the public hearing room. Turning quickly to staff, if you can indicate if you are present and alone. Benita.
Present and alone.
Barbara.
Present and alone.
Jennifer.
Present and alone.
Jody.
Present and alone.
Patrick.
Present and alone.
Jared.
Present and alone.
Keith.
Present and alone.
Nancy.
Present and alone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. First order of business, consideration and approval of the minutes of October the 16th. Are there any corrections?
Chair, we do have one correction, recognizing that, excuse me one second. In the call to order on page 2, Commissioner Hong was not present. So we'd like to strike that and make the amendment to indicate that he was excused.
Okay. Any other corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the minutes as corrected.
I
So
move.
moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Tobias, seconded by Commissioner Thielen. Discussion? Not all in favor. Roll call.
Starting with Vice Chair Tobias.
Aye.
Commissioner Hong. Actually,
I defer.
excused, recognizing. Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Thielen.
Aye.
Commissioner Becker.
Aye.
Chair.
Chair votes aye, no opposition, motion's carried. Next order of business, Director's report, education.
If I could turn that over to Benita.
Good morning, commissioners. Staff and I have been busy working on updating all our training slide decks for the live training course for ethics as well as the lobbying training to reflect changes in the law and the general updates to the statutes. We've been busy conducting several live trainings. We've had 3 in the last first week of November, including one for new legislators that are coming on board that Executive Director Harris had conducted. In the next 2 weeks, we also have several planned continuing legal education sessions for government attorneys and deputy AGs. And also at the start of the new legislative biennium, we'll be conducting mandatory lobbyist training because the start of the legislative biennium, lobbyists will all be renewing their registration. So we have one lobbyist law session and a lobbying e-filing training session that I'll be leading December 5th and 6th. We're also busy updating all our various filing and FAQ guides for the disclosure filers. Switching briefly to disclosures, we're also preparing for new filing season for legislators. We'll start filing in January, and as well as, handling all the calls from different lobbying entities that are, filing and coming online. We are putting the finishing touches of our new enhancements to the e-filing system to reflect the law statutory changes, namely the new requirement for the lobbying bill reporting, and then the legislators to report their lobbying affiliations on their disclosure. So between now and January, we're going to be busy kind of handling all that changes. So if there commissioners have any questions, I'll be glad to answer it.
Any questions from the commissioners? Have we reached our 90%?
Right.
I just raised it only 5 points only. I mean, you guys are great. It's 80, I think it was 80, 88, 80 something.
Yeah. We did send out the training commendations, right, to acknowledge the great performances for all the different agencies and boards, and had a cover letter that was signed by the chair on behalf of all the commissioners. And we also reached out to the specific agencies that we were going to follow up with. Several of them have indicated that they're continuing to work on it, and we will continue to provide our assistance as needed. A lot of it is the blue collar industries, neighbor island offices, so there are challenges operationally and in the field. So, we want to be mindful of that while also kind of recognizing that is a legal requirement. So we'll continue to provide what assistance we can to those specific agencies and divisions, right? There were a few agencies that also indicated, things like the data might not actually reflect the actual completion because they may have had lateral transfers, individuals that took the training elsewhere or outside of the LMS system. So they're trying to do a cross check of their data, and we're working with us. So those numbers may creep up.
Well, good. Keep up the good work. Any questions from the commissioners?
Just
If
a little
not-
commendation. I would just like to thank Bonita for all of her hard work with her folks.
Thank you. Yeah, the staff is definitely, we wouldn't be able to do it without the staff too. So definitely.
Well, I'll give you a compliment from the outside. I was at church and some woman who I didn't know, now I do, said, "Oh, I see you're the chair of the ethics commission. I want to tell you that I took the training, so I'm okay." Like, all right, bless you, my child. So anyway, they take it seriously. So again, thank you very much. Keep up the good work. We train them so well, we may not have any cases. Oh, never mind. Next, item number 2.
I love your optimistic thinking. Key, you don't mind handling the guidance and assignment statistics?
Sure. Pretty heavy month for assignments in October. 45 complaints opened and filed with our office, 43 closed. So we continue to close the complaints out roughly as they come in and then work on any existing complaints. Yeah, I think right on track.
Key, what it kind of tells me is that more people are aware in our system of potential ethic violations. And so they'll just raise a red flag, but they really aren't. Is that kind of like what it is?
I agree with that. The more training and outreach we do, the more complaints we get, and then we're able to direct people to appropriate resources. So, yep.
Well, good. I'm glad. Questions by the commissioners? Okay, moving on. 3.
Commissioners, I'd like to just briefly report, we have successfully launched a new case management, bond management software system. Upgrading IT software systems is never a easy or simple process. There's always a lot of detail and hurdles. I'd like to particularly commend our IT specialist, Patrick, for helping us move over to the new system as smoothly and easily as possible. There's a lot of significant improvements as a result of that. We're no longer reliant on a outdated on-point server to manage our system. We have a lot more capacity with regards to remote working and access. And I think you will start seeing next year, as we have a full year of it under our belts, the capacity to report more information and to be able to share more sort of the activities the commission's doing. So there's just a lot of upside and positives. And again, I don't think it would have happened but for the hard work of staff. Really, really proud of sort of all the hard work the staff did to get us to where we are today. That's it.
Any questions, commissioners? All right, moving on. Media reports concerning ethics.
So as a reminder, this is a standing item to allow commissioners the opportunity to talk about issues that might have been in the media regarding ethics since the last meeting. In addition, we've added an attachment that I understand commissioners may want you that came out on the day of the last meeting. The commissioners may have wanted an opportunity to read, review, and then talk about articles that I've picked up on. Just to briefly highlight, include an article or an editorial in the Civil Beat urging the state to use surplus funds to pay for government reform, and specifically noting increasing the budget for the Campaign Spending Commission. And it does quote us and talk about some of the efforts that we've been doing. There is a article talking about a publicly filed complaint about a water commissioner, a publicly noticed complaint about campaigning occurring in a Senate office. And then there's a couple of different articles about the ballot initiatives on Maui, which I will report successfully passed, which will now, according to that, require Maui to fund the ethics board on Maui with staff and an executive director moving forward.
Great.
Yes, commissioners? Just for your information, Robin and I did submit testimony in regards to the funding of a staff for this Maui Ethics Commission. Mike Lilly, who I think most of us know is a former AG, is on that board or commission rather, and I'm glad to see that now they have the support that they need. Not like us, we're very fortunate to have such a very large and capable staff. They were down to doing their own investigation as commissioners, so we're happy that at least we're helping them out, or we did help them out to get their staff. Do you have any comment on that?
We've had a couple different discussions with Maui. So yeah, I think it's an incredibly important note, and I hope it's something we can use to point Kauai and the island of Hawaiʻi boards as steps they can do to build up their system as well.
Any questions, Commissioner? Okay, moving along. Item number 4, oversight judicial branch.
I can turn this one over to Jennifer.
Hi. So late last month, the judicial branch came out with some proposed rules for their code of conduct, and we've reviewed them. We've taken some preliminary positions, and we'd like to maybe work with Chair Fong offline to develop our comments in response to those proposed rules.
I'm glad they're taking the initiative because we've already met with them a few times, and I do have some questions in regards to what they propose, but we're not going to discuss it now. We haven't got time. Maybe we can, set aside a special meeting and just review it. I like to review it, and we can have that the whole commission or just steps.
So I think part of the intent here is to authorize us to submit comments. There's a January comment deadline, and we've already reached out to the judiciary staff attorney who worked on these rules about trying to set up a meeting in December to talk to them about it verbally. And I think the intent would be is working with the chair directly in drafting those comments and submitting them in. We could potentially have them drafted by the December meeting and allow the commission to review them before there's some.
Should we have I'm debating whether to have the whole commission, all the commissioners at a special meeting just to discuss the proposals by the judiciary, or just, whoever is interested. What do you think?
From a sunshine perspective, having the chair designated just because you spearheaded a lot of this project to begin with, to be in the meeting, I think would make sense. But I'd recommend that, particularly on a one-on-one meeting with the staff attorney. If there is a full commission meeting, obviously that would be a sunshine meeting. And at that point, we might as well have a draft of the comments in front of us. We could do that in December anyways.
How about this? If all of the commissioners would take a look at the excuse me, proposed, well, what the judiciary has proposed and send it to Robert by a certain date. And then we'll just kind of compile it all and then have a discussion with the judiciary, well, their representative. Is that okay with everybody? What do you both think?
I think that would be okay.
Yeah, there's a hyperlink to the actual rules in the agenda, and then there's my summary and staff overview as well.
I'm sorry, who's talking?
Oh, that
That's
was
Jenna.
me.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Right. I didn't
Yeah.
see your mouth move. Okay, Commissioner Thielen, you okay with that?
Fine.
Okay, so what I'll do is, we'll set a deadline. Deadline, you know.
We do by the end of the month.
End of the month, review the proposals by the judiciary and send it in to Robert, and we'll compile it and we'll look it over and discuss it with the judiciary representative. If there's no objections or any problem, Robert, I didn't ask you, is that okay? Commissioner Hall? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Fine.
All right, so we'll do that. End of the month, send in your comments. So we'll do that. Okay. Let's see what's next. Number 5. Question. Go ahead.
Yeah, just maybe it's just a quick note before going. I would like to thank the judiciary for having been responsive to our input, our comments, and proposing something for public review. And you know, it is a collaborative effort that, you know, I think wouldn't have happened but for the fact that the judiciary was willing to hear, listen, and address the concerns that we were flagging. So, you know, thanks to them, and hopefully we'll continue to collaborate moving forward. The item number 5 is based on conversations or issues that Mr. Thielen has addressed and raised. So we had originally contacted the National Conference of State Legislators for statutes or laws that addressed specifically the concern about a high-level Hawaii state employee contacting contractors and involving them in political donations or political campaigning. And so looking for model language we might be able to take. There's a staff analysis attached on 5 based on 2 statutes, both in Ohio and Kentucky. We also reached out to the ethics boards there and solicited input. The short analysis or conclusions briefly are that while Ohio and Kentucky on the surface look very broad and powerful and drawing a bright line, in actuality, the number of employees excluded is pretty large, and it really seems targeted to maybe what I'd call sort of, with no disrespect, lower level employees, and sort of exempts the higher level folks who might have more authority over contracts and other kinds of matters. So we do make 2 recommendations, which, you know, continue the recommendation to support the Campaign Spending Commission's efforts to pass a law prohibiting principals, owners of government contractors from making political contributions. In addition, we proposed 2 changes to the rules specifically to fair treatment, which I hope would address some of the concerns that have been flagged. And we can discuss them now or, you know, with regards to the next section, which is the rule changes themselves. The language is in the attachment, which is found on page 54 of your agenda item. So the first proposed for fair treatment would be that it is prohibited for legislators and employees to use or attempt to use their official position to solicit, request, or otherwise extract political contributions or support for any candidate, campaign, or political party from any vendor, contractor, or any other person or business engaged in procurement with their state agency, or over any individual or business that they supervise, regulate, inspect, or otherwise exercise official authority. The next line, which is something I think we would have always interpreted, but having it more explicitly put in, I think is helpful, is it would prohibit legislators' employees from engaging in or knowingly allow a subordinate to engage in discrimination, favoritism, or retaliation based on an individual's political beliefs, affiliations, or activities, including hiring, promoting, demoting, or otherwise treating individuals or entities differently based on their participation or lack of participation in political activities.
Any comments or any questions by commissioners in regards to those changes?
Yoo-hoo. I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Oh, Commissioner Thielen? Yes, I'm sorry.
thank you. Robert, so applying that change to the rules, I read it as that could have prohibited that Deputy Director of Transportation from facilitating that brown bag, money bag event, right?
If this were added to our rules.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Based on the facts as we understand them, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
Then Robert, then the training would specifically go in and show that that type of a thing would be illegal for a high-ranking government official in a department to facilitate that type of brown bag money gift event, right?
Correct. If it is a contractor engaged in procurement with their state agency.
Well, yeah, but I want the restriction on the government high level employee, deputy director, whatever it is, that the restriction, and then the training would be amended to show that that type of an activity would be unethical, pardon me.
Correct. Right? If this rule were to be adopted. Correct.
Right. So now what is the next process? We go ahead and work on the new rules. Do we take a step today to say, yes, we want this in the new rules? And then what's the time frame for the new rules?
The next question.
Yeah, so our next agenda item, we'll be talking about revisions to our Chapter 7. We've been going through the different revisions, mostly to get commissioners' input, and we've asked for no official action at this stage. Next steps include having the Attorney General, our Deputy Attorney General is here in the meeting. Eventually, we would also have to go to public hearing, and then the commission would, after any amendments are made, would vote on the draft rules after getting all the public comment and input. It also has to go to the governor for approval. So there are many steps sort of yet in the process. I would anticipate any rule changes, probably looking at, 6 months to a year before they're finalized. I'm just recognizing that, some of the steps like turning over the governor for the governor's review and approval, sometimes can take a long time.
Okay, so that's the end amount, a year, but back up to how fast can we start the process going? When will you be ready? When will staff be ready for that?
We are starting the process. So you've seen chapters 1 through 6 already. You're seeing chapter 7 today. There are a total, at the end of the day, we're going to propose one additional chapter. We're probably going to be looking at about 12 chapters total. So we're about halfway through the process already of making draft revisions. So, we are trying to move as expeditiously as we can.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That was the follow-up question. How long will it take to get this got a part of the gospel, ethics gospel, quote unquote. I thank excuse me, I thank the staff for going through each one of them with if we're gonna revise, let's do it one time and, you know, be satisfied with it. So again, thank you. It's gonna take some time. And if memory serves me correct, we'll all still be in office, right?
Should be.
Yeah, we'll all still be here, by the way. Yeah, so hopefully we'll be through with all the revisions by the end of the year at least. No, probably
Next year.
by next year. So at least we're progressing. Anyway, thank you. Any other questions or comments about the revisions? If not, moving on.
Okay. So Chair, we have revisions to Chapter 7, and these are probably going to be the most extensive and detailed based on what we've discussed so far. And these have been potentially the most controversial. So taking a step back, this is gifts and fair treatment. Gifts have been a subject of a lot of controversy. As a reminder, the general statute that controls this takes a reasonableness approach. And so they look at whether or not a reasonable person would construe the gift as an attempt to reward or influence a person in their official capacity. So, on a national level, there are a lot of discussions about how this rule is both universally liked and in the application disliked, because it is sometimes difficult to come to agreement of what is reasonably construed to influence or reward somebody. That being said, in 2020, we did a pretty significant revision, which adopted a 3-point factor test in determining whether a gift could be accepted. That looked at who was making the gift. It looked at the value or the price of the gift, and it looked at what is the state purpose. That is a very flexible test. It allows us to say yes in situations where there, for example, there's a strong state purpose. And it allowed us to say no in other circumstances, like a lobbyist giving directly to a legislator, where inherently it appears like it's intended to influence or reward. That being said, I think one of the criticisms we've received is that the factor test is blurry. It's not easy necessarily for an individual employee or legislator to apply. And so we have attempted to try to create some more bright line exceptions that make it easier for legislators or employees in individual circumstances to be able to say, yeah, that's okay, without necessarily always having to call the Ethics Commission for advice. That's part of the intent here, and sort of why some of these draft rules are being proposed. I'm going to walk through the changes in maybe more detail than we had before, just because they are so extensive. And at any time, if anybody wants to pause and ask questions, please just interrupt me. I'm happy to talk about things. So we're starting on page 59, labeled Attachment 2 on the top. I'm starting with definitions. We have made an attempt to define a prohibited source, which is a term we have not used in the past. And then when talking about when gifts could or could not be accepted, we've now started trying to use the term prohibited source. The idea we can kind of talk about that in a training, or use that as an easy shorthand to discuss why gifts could or could not be taken. Prohibited source are types of individuals that you would expect. So someone if an employee regulates someone, that would be a prohibitive source. If someone's seeking a contract or has a contract, that'd be a prohibitive source. Has a direct financial interest in something that is being considered by that employee or legislator, and so on. So these are not necessarily new concepts, but we're trying to define it as a term. Next, we've defined protocol gift, and that term is used later as an exception. And then we view the protocol gift as something that is given with the intent that it's given to the state. So it might be something that's uniquely historical or cultural. And although it may be given, for example, to the governor, really the intent is this is part of Hawaii's history, recognizing a special, unique circumstance or situation.
Robert, let me interrupt.
Sure.
Why don't we go through the first 21-7-1? Any questions on that, first of all? Is there a reason why, I'll ask you, not exceeding $5? Is there a reason why we got $5 in the $10, $20, whatever? Maybe it's a
So you're talking about nominal.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So nominal is used a few times, and modest and nominal are terms that we've used in the past. And sometimes people have asked, what does that mean? So nominal was intended to be something really, truly insignificant. So we've put a $5 term to say it was insignificant. So an example might be a cup of coffee when you're attending a widely attended conference, or a donut. It's supposed to be really low value.
Okay, I just wonder what the example would be. $5. Coffee is. You go to Starbucks, isn't it more than $5?
So again, the challenge with bright line rules is that they're easy to apply, but sometimes they're going to come up with unfair results. We are fixing, distinction between modest and nominal. Nominal is intended to be really something that is insignificant.
So the Hawaiian word is manini.
Manini would be another good way of phrasing it.
All right, got it. All right. Any questions on that? 7, I'm gonna go through each, she go through each. 2021-7-1. Any questions, commissioners, or?
If you don't mind, if I could talk about widely attended events, that's probably the biggest one.
Go ahead.
So widely attended event is an exception that we've seen in other states and other jurisdictions. The concept being, for example, if a nonprofit has a community meeting where they're inviting a number of their members, and they invite somebody who is specifically related to that, has a state reason to be there, we are trying to essentially say that if you don't mind the analogy, if you're attending it because it's part of your state duties and it's a rubber chicken dinner versus a steak and lobster, we're trying to create a mechanism to make it easy to determine based on the price point whether you can go or not. And so this is a new exception, and it's a pretty wide, big one. Even lobbyists, for example, could hold a widely attended event that's genuinely open to the public or open to members in a specific industry or profession. So again, imagine the Society of Engineers holding a dinner, imagine AARP holding a dinner. So long as the value of the meal is relatively low, this is creating a new exception for that. And so happy to talk about it in more depth or detail, but sort of recognizing the idea is to make this easier for a legislator or an employee to be able to kind of quickly ascertain whether they can attend if invited or not. I will also point out, just for those of you that are wondering about the value that's created, if you look on page 58, we made an attempt to make a evaluation of costs if you were to host an event with 50 people, and one of our wonderful staff, Miles here, helped actually call and get price items for each of these things. So depending on the different venues, what the cost would be for the venue per person, the meal per person, and then coming up with total event costs. And as you can see, most of the hotel events wind up being relatively expensive. And so we're trying to basically create a bright line value of anything below a certain amount. And in this case, we proposed all costs included per person below $100 would be allowed. Anything above $100 would not be allowed.
Any questions? I'm glad you explained that. I was going to ask about that. Some organizations, they have these fundraisers and they invite the legislators to them, and they're not cheap. They're definitely, we just had one of $130. That was, and we didn't get in very much to eat, but that wasn't going right. But this would cover that type of activity.
So what is proposed, and again, it's later on. So we have a definition of what is a widely attended event,
okay,
which is an organized planned event where over 25 people who are not employees, legislators, or lobbyists are invited and reasonably expected to attend. Written materials are made available, including a program, invitation, et cetera. They're well before the event. If we skip over to 21-7-4.
What page is that?
That's on page 62.
Okay, go ahead.
We have some of the definitions of when people can accept that. So the admission or the complimentary dip, the free ticket has to come from the sponsor, can't come from someone else. Generally, it has to be available for the public, so it can't be like a closed meeting or closed event. It has to be something that's kind of widely available to everybody to attend. It's reasonably related to the employer legislator's official duties and responsibilities. And then the price per person cost is no more than $100. And then there's a pretty extensive definitions of how do you determine what is price per person, what is complimentary attendance, and what is reasonably expected to attend. The intent is to be able to allow a sponsor to kind of quickly figure out, can I invite these folks or not? So at $130 per person, no, that would not be allowed because that's too expensive. We're saying it has to be below $100 per person. So,
Okay.
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question while we're on that, on page 62. What about when you have a large event like that and somebody is a guest speaker, and their meal may or may not be covered and that kind of thing? How does that roll into that?
sure. So this is a bright line exception. So this is one where people can pretty quickly say yay or nay, I can go. The 3-point factor test still applies. So if it's $130 and someone's invited as a guest speaker, like the governor's invited to come speak, we've typically said yes in those types of occasions, but it might be a circumstance where the person would have to contact the ethics commission and get approval ahead of time or do the analysis ahead of time. So the idea of the exceptions, we're trying to create like these are low-hanging fruit circumstances. It's a yes, and employees and legislators can pretty quickly figure that out without having to talk to us. However, it doesn't mean just because an event is more expensive, you can't attend. There may be reason for someone to attend that using our traditional 3-point factor test, there's a significant state purpose. It's directly tied to responsibilities, et cetera, that we would still say yes to.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Yes, I have a question, Robert. How is this going to be implemented?
I think the hope here is that there are certain entities that host these kinds of events frequently, and they're reasonably well known. And the hope is to try to work with them more collaboratively ahead of time so they understand if they want to invite legislators or employees, this is what the price has to be. It has to be below that, and they have to be able to know that ahead of time. So the idea is that when they do the invitation, they can pretty clearly signal that and make the information available to us or others if need be to verify it. So a common entity, for example, that hosts a lot of events might be a trade association of some kind. For example, a society of engineers may have very real practical issues that certain legislators or employees, it may be very valuable for them to get that feedback information. And so the idea is, attending those events isn't necessarily a problem, particularly if it is a lower value meal, not really intended to influence or reward specifically, but rather that's just the function of how this group meets or how they are able to get all their members together at once.
And so if there are violations of this protocol, what are the consequences? Or is that going to come in at a later chapter?
Yeah, so one of the things that specifically states if, like, for example, 25 people don't show up and it winds up just being lobbyists and the legislator, we've signaled in here that the legislator would be required to pay back any of the costs of attendance. That's one sort of mechanism there already in place. So you'd have to pay for your own dinner if indeed it didn't actually become a widely attended event. And we'd still retain our enforcement capability if there were sort of blatant violations, just as normal. We can go and enforce that as a prohibited gift being given.
Any other questions? I'll just to give a caveat. I think maybe we'll probably get some feedback from once we put it out to the public. I mean, right now, I'll give you an example. I've been invited to a few organizations which I know do business with the state, and I know I'm going to see state legislators there. So, and I know it's more than $100. So stay tuned, as I should say, because I don't know where that threshold is, but again, it's a good start. Any other questions? Comments? Yes, go ahead, Ron.
These events, have they met the 3-point test? previously, so people ask you if they can attend something similar, and have you guys allowed them to attend?
I can't answer that in a blanket basis. So there's certainly been occasions where we've said yes to people attending some of these events in the past. The rules as drafted, though, this is probably a broader exception than what we've allowed previously. We are trying to be responsive to some of the concerns and complaints we've received since the 2020 rules went in. And I think there's a recognition that, again, particularly in a legislator context, part of their duties are to receive feedback and input from various constituents, not just in their district sometimes. And the mechanism by which some of these different groups meet, tends to be small spaghetti dinners, those kinds of things. And reasonably, one could say that those are not necessarily intended to reward or influence the legislator employee, but just rather it's a convenient mechanism to allow those interactions to occur. So this is an expansion, I think, perhaps of what we have maybe have said previously, and it's an attempt to try to create something that's operational going forward. I think it still needs some kinks to be worked out, and I think we'd like to talk to legislators and employees to get their feedback, as well as organizations. But it is a good faith attempt to try to find a workable solution that can be long lasting.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to 21-7 prohibited. You mentioned it.
Sure. So this one's pretty simple. We are taking out the lengthy discussion there, just using the defined term of prohibited source, and some, I guess I call it technical amendments.
Food and drink.
Yeah.
I'm glad you eliminated golf tournaments. I was saying, I'm glad you eliminated golf tournaments because I've been to many golf tournaments where, they invite the legislators, and let me tell you, legislators do play golf. Any questions on 21-7-2? Next.
So 21-7-3, these are the sort of per se allowed items. So this is sort of the clear exception list. We've added the acceptance of a protocol gift, which again, we're defining as something that's being given to the state. And the idea is we're actually asking them to register or give it, let the state know that this item has been received. So in this case, we're asking to contact the Hawaiʻi State Archives and then to maintain it or keep it according to what the state archivist directs. I can see potentially expanding this to maybe include others beyond just the state archivist, but the idea is if an item's been received, if there's some record of it, the archivist can allow that legislator or employee to keep the item while they're in office, but the idea is it's now part of the state inventory, and there's a mechanism to get it back or maintain it in a way that keeps it and protects it as a part of Hawaii's history. There's some examples here, which I won't get into detail, of prominent legislators where we know that there's likely significant numbers of items given over the years that when they left office, they all disappeared. And so I think the attempt here is to really create a paper trail mechanism to say, no, these items should be given to the state archives to be kept for everybody to Hawaii.
I guess my question in this one, when I read it, is what if a legislator or a government official gets a very expensive bottle of single malt liquor from Japan?
So that's a great question. I know we talked to city of Chicago, and they had a very similar example where at the time as Mayor Rahm Emanuel received, it was a whiskey, and you have to be a whiskey drinker. And in that case, they actually required him to pay the city for the value of that whiskey if he wanted to drink it. Otherwise, it had to be maintained. There's going to be some outlier circumstances here. You can imagine a customary made cloak, for example, that's made uniquely for that individual size or shape. And those circumstances are going to be tricky to deal with. But I think the intent is to force the conversation and to recognize really high value items, really should be part of state's history. You can imagine, again, an ambassador giving a gift to the governor, and then the ambassador's son 50 years later coming back and saying, I want to see that item, like this is a part of our rich history. And we'd like to be able to say, we know where it is and here it is. You can see it, right? Again, the state archivist can give you some really, I'd say sad or traumatic stories of things that are forever gone. That, I think most of us would say this really should be something that people of Hawaii could see, but they're lost to time. And we'd like to try to make sure to recognize that the gifts are not being given in a personal capacity, and that's why we're putting it here.
Well, the reason I asked the question is they've been to a few and they've legislated, and some of them have been received, given things like not food, more, it's liquor, and they're expensive. So the question is, can you keep that in, what does the guy do with it? Legislature do with it, or the governor do with it? Just keep it for show? It's good liquor. So what do you do with it? These are some of the, I guess if I can, what I'm looking at is you're putting the burden on them so that they can come to us to get approvals. That's pretty much it. That's what we really want to do.
I think with these that are given to the state, I think the idea is to allow the state to have some mechanism. And in this case, the archivist seems the most appropriate in that their job is to preserve the history of Hawaii, the ability to, engage in a discussion. So if they have an agreement, for example, allowing the governor to keep the item, subject to certain rules and restrictions, then that's fine. It's now state property and the state's maintaining it. It's sort of out of our hands. I think our jurisdiction really is on personal gifts, and we're basically saying this is not a personal gift.
Let me go one step further. Let's say the governor gets a very expensive bottle of single malt liquor from Japan, like the Yamasaki, etc. Okay, if he shares it with his cabinet, is that okay? Would he be off the hook?
No. That would be a personal gift, and the value of that could be quite high, right?
Oh, very high.
Yeah. So that is essentially accepting a personal gift of that nature. And so I think we would indicate, if you want to fall in this exception, this is what you need to do.
Even though he was going to share with it, he's not going to keep it himself, but share with his cabinet.
We get versions of that all the time. Food was dropped off at our agency. I'm not going to take it and share it for every employee. And we've generally said, no, you can't do that. That is still a perception of a gift being given to the agency and being broadly distributed to everybody. And there are, examples that are quite gross, like, certain permitting agencies getting, massive amounts of food over time. That's just problematic from public perception that this is all done to influence or reward those employees or to get the agency to do something.
Any follow-up questions, Commissioner? None? Okay, let's move next on.
Sure. So we've included two more exceptions on page 62. Modest gifts from fellow employees regarding special occasions. And this is something I think we've always recognized, but we're actually putting it into rule. I think the language may still need some work, but the idea is to sort of recognize something we've always traditionally said that's okay. We've created a new exception for nominally priced food and drinks. So the idea is if a lobbying organization is holding a general meeting on some issue that's important to them, and they happen to provide to everyone, for example, the standard coffee and donuts that are in front, the idea is that they can take that as long as it's below $5. And the idea is it really should be nominal. It's not supposed to be something fancy or expensive. So if it's a full buffet breakfast or something, you can say, no, you shouldn't take it.
Go ahead. Is general meeting defined?
It is not. And I think that is a good flag or something we should look at.
Okay. You hear the question? Was a general meeting defined, and maybe the staff could tackle that. Okay, any other questions or comments from the commissioners on 21-7-3? Next.
We also gave a couple of examples to the unsolicited gift of nominal value. I think this is typically viewed as like the apple to the teacher. So we're giving some examples of some things that would be similar, which include one that we've heard from legislators quite a bit, which includes sort of home-baked or home-grown food items given by a constituent. And again, if it's nominal value below $5, we're not going to say there's a problem with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Next.
21-7-4, we've talked about already, which is the widely attended events.
Any questions on 21-7-4? Commissioners?
No.
21-7-5, the only change is to use the term prohibited source. No changes made to 21-7-6 or 21-7-7. We've concluded two new sections. The first one on page 65, which is not numbered, includes a presumption of gift acceptance. So we've had circumstances where a group of legislators or employees have gone out with a lobbyist for, dinner, drinks, etc., and the lobbyist has paid for it on their credit card, and the legislator employees claim that they threw cash in to pay for their portion of it, and it's been difficult to prove that or not. So I think here we're basically stating, and we can work into our training material, there will be a concrete presumption that the lobbyist paid for you unless you have some record that you actually paid for it, like a Venmo or some type of electronic proof that you actually paid you a portion of it.
Good luck.
Well, now there'll be presumption that, the lobbyist paid for it. The idea is to sort of put the onus on the employee to prove that they actually paid for their portion of it.
The only reason I say good luck is in the past, and I beat on the liquor commission. We talk about hostess bars that don't give receipts. But anyway, the onus is on the legislator.
And then another one that we've included is the presumption that somebody is being given a gift if it's in their official capacity. It's being done to influence, based on who's giving it. It's being done to affect the source's interest, if there's an interest in giving it. So, for example, if a employee is offered a travel to a conference by another party because of their position, the idea is that that's done as a means to affect their official action. And that is something that can be rebutted. The idea is it's just creating that example that, it's something you should be, our gift rules apply and the gift reporting rules will apply in those types of circumstances in the future. Not that they can't take it, just our gift rules do apply.
Again, putting the onus on or the burden on the employee or government official. Questions, comments, commissioners on that section?
For the lunches, so I guess if you go to lunch with an employee goes to lunch with somebody, basically not allowed to use. So they will need to.
Ideally, they're going to have some mechanism to, in real time, establish that they paid for their portion, right? And so the preference would be is to use a check or do something that would create a record.
Did other commissioners hear the question by Commissioner Becker?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good question. Go ahead.
The next section that received some significant changes is 21-7-10, which runs from page 66. The actual changes, however, are on page 67. We have previously allowed the governor, the Speaker of the House, and President of the Senate, Chief Justice, the Board of Directors, the Office of Foreign Affairs, President of UH to authorize fundraising. And we've added a new note which requires them to notify the commission in writing with a clear indication of the duration of the approval of such fundraising. So currently, for example, fundraising is allowed for the Aloha United Way. For example, we deemed the governor's emergency proclamation for Maui wildfires as an authorization of fundraising, allowing state employees or legislators to use state time for such purposes. And we're just trying to basically tighten down procedurally that they actually have to notify us, and there should be some time limit on it.
Questions, comments, commissioners?
And then sections, new paragraphs 8 and 9 are ones that we already talked about in the prior agenda item with Commissioner Thielen.
Okay. Questions, comments, commissioners?
The new section on the bottom of page 67 is, we're now moving a little bit outside of gifts. We are now squarely in fair treatment. We're also including a section on social media accounts. And thanks to Nancy who helped draft this section. The state probably needs a broad social media policy. I think the only restriction that has occurred on social media has largely been our fair treatment interpretations. So this generally would apply, for example, where a legislator creates a social media account and uses state time, like a state employee's time, or uses state resources to maintain that social media account. So we're considering it a state resource. It's almost like a newsletter, but instead of a printed newsletter, it's now an electronic newsletter. It's being used using electronic means. And so this rule is intending to basically indicate, therefore, the fair treatment restrictions apply. You can't now use this social media account to promote a business, for example. And it's trying to be a little bit more specific. I don't think any of this is necessarily new. It's something we've always interpreted, but by putting it in writing, we're trying to make it a little bit more clear, and it's something we can point people directly towards.
Well, I'll ask a question. Maybe Nancy can answer it, or maybe Robbie. Give me an example of some of the problems or the issues that we're facing because of this. The reason why we're putting this in.
I'll take a stab at it. Nancy, feel free to jump in. An example might be a state account, social, like a Facebook account for a specific legislator that then turns around and tries to endorse a political candidate. We're going to say you can't do that. It's a state account. Some state employees put time and energy and effort creating this. You now can no longer use it for political endorsement. Another example might be recommending a business. I went to McDonald's this morning. You should go check them out, for example, would be something we'd say you can't do. And these are similar restrictions we already apply on newsletters and other things. We're trying to make sure it's really concrete with regards to social media.
Nancy, anything to add?
No, I guess so.
That's okay.
I guess one of the sort of more subtle things that we've been seeing is that, for example, if there's a news article out there with a picture of you in front of the state seal and you're making a speech or something, that's in the public, it's in the public realm. Anybody can use that image. What's one of the fears is that legislators will use an official image, post it to their social media account. Now it's in the public realm. Anybody can use it, including their campaign. So it's a sort of a workaround, a restriction of using the state seal for private purposes that we're trying to guard against.
Let me ask you a question. It came up, but I thought it was Benini. There was a legislator that he gave a campaign plug for his own campaign, but it was at the state capitol, and everybody got upset. Is that something that you shouldn't do? Is that covered anywhere?
So we don't want to talk about a specific fact situation because, again, if it's something that's before us, an investigation,
sure.
Just generally apply to everybody. If you're in a public area, then it's not a state resource. So the Capitol Rotunda, for example, where it's public and open and accessible, anybody could do a campaign speech there. But if you're in a private area, like an office area that is closed to the public, the only reason why you're able to be there is because of your office or position. We would say that's a fair treatment violation. You're not allowed to campaign in state offices, for example. So, there are areas where you can't do it. And legislators are typically pretty aware of that and sort of know where they can or can't do it.
Okay. The reason I brought it up, I think he did his little speech, whatever it was, out on the veranda. What do you call it? Outside of the office. Just curious. Any questions or comments from the commissioners in regards to this section? Yeah. Commissioner Hall?
In general, so what will be the consequences? Are we going to report this annually, violations annually? Are there some kind of tracking methods, besides, just saying that these things have occurred?
So the commission retains its ability to do enforcement, and whether it's in some circumstances, I mean, for social media, for example, we already do, and we have already had some enforcement cases regarding social media. In addition, sometimes where we see it as a gray area or something where it's not entirely clear, we will issue guidance and encourage the legislator, to be aware of the circumstance in the future, or the employee be aware of the circumstance in the future. But again, by just spelling out the rules, we are creating a little bit more crystal clear guidance, and it is potentially something that might be enforceable in the future too.
Any other questions or comments?
So the last section, I know you've listened to me talk a lot. I appreciate your courtesy. Is a new section on honoraria. This largely arises out of the University of Hawaiʻi, where apparently it is pretty customary and normal for professors to receive honoraria when they're traveling from conference to conference. And that on a national level, this occurs. And in order to recognize that and or to create sort of a clear guideline, we're sort of proposing a proposed rule. It's modeled after the New York model, and Key did a lot of work on this. Is essentially try to create some pretty clear situations where you could receive an honoraria. And largely, I might be grossly summarizing, it's if you do it on your own time, not using state resources, some are allowed to accept honoraria. However, if you're using state time or state resources, presumptively you're acting in your official position, and you would not be allowed to accept the honoraria. Key, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Nope, that's right.
Okay, any questions, comments by the commissioners on this section?
Yeah, so with the travel, so state paid travel, would they still be collecting an honorarium?
No.
Okay. So it'd have to be their own time, they pay for their flights.
Like vacation time, et cetera, yes. So, I mean, the intent here is, for example, during COVID, Hawaii was recognized as being one of the leaders, and somebody who had unique experience based on their state position or time, if they flew to a conference in the mainland and received an honorarium to speak about the lessons learned, there's sort of a general benefit to society, and we wouldn't want to necessarily discourage that or prohibit them from doing it. But the idea is also, if the state's paying you to go on that trip, then that's your compensation. A supervisor authorized it, that's your compensation. If you're doing it on your own time, then you can accept the honorarium.
Also, subsection D basically says that if you're, on a state trip talking about COVID relief and you're a DOH official, you could donate it to your department, because that would be a prohibited honoraria. So the state can, accept honoraria on behalf of the employees and not have that be prohibited.
Okay, so taking leave for like 2 hours while you make the speech wouldn't mitigate that.
If there was travel involved and the state paid for the travel, it would not mitigate it. If you, for example, sometimes speakers, they will be paid to travel over, to fly there. So state won't be paying for the flight, and you're speaking and you receive a $200 or $300 honorarium. It's all in your own time. I think it's something we would say, under this proposal, we could accept. We did exempt those required to file public financial disclosures, which includes legislators and directors, largely, and certain board commission members. So they, essentially really high level folks would still not be allowed to accept honorarium. We didn't want to create a loophole for sort of illegal gifts. So it really is sort of intended more for your middle level and folks at an agency or department or a professor or something of that nature.
How about the judiciary?
So this would apply to judiciary employees. As you know, the code of ethics does not apply to judges or justices.
That's the reason I asked. Did you hear my question? It doesn't apply to judges. Okay, it's employees. Did everybody hear Commissioner Becker's question? Okay, I don't know. I'll proceed. Anything else?
That is a lot of changes. Thank you for the time and attention to it.
Well, thank you. All right, moving right along. Where are we now? Item number
7, I believe.
7. Proposed budget.
So commissioners, we have to submit a proposed budget to the legislature. And so we are trying to give you what we're proposing for input. This is for fiscal year 2025 and 2026. Just comparing it to last year's budget, I'd like to flag a few things in particular. This is page 71. Obviously, starting from the top line, we're actually proposing a 2.1% decrease from last year's budget. And that is as a result of a couple things. We have significantly decreased our telephone and internet expenses by moving away from our old contracts and moving to voice over internet protocol and using a less expensive internet provider. We have eliminated the monthly rental and service charge for a copier and essentially just moved more to digitization and not using paper copies as much as we used to. In addition, we're cutting back on the amount of funds being used for computer consulting, which was largely used to update and modernize our electronic filing system. A lot of the improvements have been made, and we don't necessarily need to keep that standing item in the budget. And then finally, as you know, we renegotiated our lease and saw a decrease. And so we're seeing a decrease in that expense of that is relatively significant of $26,000 this year. We have increased a few things, and I just like to flag it. We've increased some of the out-of-state travel expenses to keep up with sort of just where these are, but we're also proposing to fly a couple of employees for training next year. Recognizing we now have a full-time investigator, we'd like to make sure that they have an opportunity to attend training as need be, as well as the opportunity to look at some new training conferences to sort of enhance our overall training efforts. We've also proposed to increase some expenditure specifically to training videos and sort of modernizing some of our training outreach. So the bulk of folks who've gone through training in 2022 and 2023, when their term comes up and they have to go through training again, our hope is they're going to see a much newer and better training next go around. And that's it.
Any questions or comments? I have one. Good job in cutting down our budget. Having worked for the state and the city for such a long time, once you cut it down, it's hard to go back up. So are you sure you're comfortable with all these adjustments, that we can still function as we have?
Answering the last question, yes. And I think we've always tried to take the approach, and we've been very public about the legislature. We've returned funds when we have not needed to spend it, and we sometimes we return significant amounts of money. We've tried to project, I think, very clear budgets, and hopefully that degree of trust, is something that we'll earn, and we have earned with the legislature. So when we ask for new expenditures, I'm hoping they will understand that we've always been honest with them.
So I'm going to ask Commissioner Becker, being in the state, any comments on that?
I concur with your comments. Unusual for ask for a decrease.
But no objections.
Well, so does the ethics budget get submitted directly to the legislature?
We are part of the legislative budget, and so we will be part of the legislature's, the ombudsman, and the auditor's budget. And we have seen some significant increases in part because of the attention and focus in ethics. And we have increased, 1.5 full-time positions over the past 2 years. And we've gotten additional funding with respect to modernizing our computer system. So in part, this is sort of recognizing that updating the computer system is now done, and also recognizing we successfully renegotiated a lower cost lease for the bulk of the reduction.
I did have one question. The staff salaries, so usually that at least might go up. So how does that get calculated?
Yeah, so typically the legislature adds a across the board percent increase, and they're the ones who usually have added that in the past, and they do it to be in line with what the executive branch has negotiated with the union employees. So we have not specifically indicated that there, but in the past, for example, like a 3% increase has been added in.
But I'll take care of it.
Any other questions or comments from the other commissioners? No? Okay. All right. Moving right along, item number 8, proposed legislation.
So commissioners, we are drafting legislation, and I apologize, we'll probably need a meeting in December, albeit the December meeting might be fairly quick to go over any additional proposed pieces of legislation that we would submit for the legislature to introduce. This bill that you see attached on page 74 is a bill that we had introduced last year and it did not pass, which is essentially amending the definition of lobbyist to include high-level executive officers being contacted for procurement efforts outside of the procurement process. So solicitations of specific project ideas, specific technologies, if it meets the lobbying threshold, the idea is to add some transparency about those contact or interaction. And in addition, it might pick up some of the gift restrictions about what could be gifted or not gifted to high-level executive employees. We have consulted other agencies, including the state procurement office, and gotten sign off on this proposed language. So we're hoping to introduce it again and keep the conversation going on it.
Questions, comments, commissioners?
No.
Okay. Let's see.
I'd actually ask, if you don't mind,
Sure.
if the commissioners are willing to do a motion to support the introduction of this bill.
I was wondering if you want, are you, commissioners, are you comfortable in taking action on this bill? It's actually a repeat sense. And
Yes.
is that be so moved?
Yeah.
Second,
Moved by Commissioner Thielen, seconded by Commissioner Tobias, that we approve the proposed House bill on what is this?
Relating to lobbying.
Relating to lobbying. Any discussion? Not. Roll call.
Starting with Vice Chair Tobias,
Aye.
Commissioner Hong,
Aye.
Commissioner Thielen,
aye.
Commissioner Becker,
Aye.
Chair.
Chair votes aye, no objection, motion's carried. All right, next, item number, what are we, 9 now? Meeting calendar. What are we doing? Approving them?
Again, I don't think it hurts to do a motion in this regard, but I think this is more for the commissioners' discussion. Again, it's whether or not we want to keep the same commission meeting time for the calendar year moving forward, and just giving you something to look at with regards to holidays, et cetera.
Is it okay if I just have any objections with one motion?
I don't think we need a motion for this. Again, you guys can always do changes to the anytime you want.
Let me just say, it's on page 79. Any objections to the calendar? Basically, it's every third Wednesday of the month. There are no conflicts anywhere. I don't see any.
No.
Okay. No objections. We'll keep it the way it is. 9 o'clock. Or third Wednesday of the month. Okay. Item number, oh God. Item number 10. Akana. Yes. No.
No updates on this matter. I'm still waiting for the Supreme Court.
Well, as I said before, I hope it's going to be over before I leave. Well, the next, never mind. I hate to give this to the next team, quote unquote. Anyway, item number, any questions? No. Item number 11.
So, commissioners, if you remember, this was discussed earlier. This is simply an update to indicate that we are preparing an amicus brief and filing of this case. If there are any questions about it with regards to our powers, duties, privileges, immunities, or liabilities, I'd recommend moving to executive session. If there are no questions, I think we can just let the matter go.
Are there any questions on this? Comments? I don't think it's necessary then. Okay. I think that's all I have. Anything else?
That is.
All right. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. And
So
moved by Commissioner Hong,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Thielen. All those in favor, do we need a roll call? We need a roll call.
Assume it's unanimous. Is everybody, no objections?
If no objections, then that's okay. No objections, no motion necessary. We are now adjourned and the time is now 10:17. Let's take a